The word this morning comes from a translation of Revelations 21, 1 through 5. It's an apocalyptic vision of God's good future, and it staggers our imagination. But the Greek word for new used here, kainos, does not mean absolutely new, but means new in quality, not brand new, but renewed, revived. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, and I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the home of God is among mortals. God will pitch his tent with them as their God. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them. God will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away." And the one who was seated on the throne said, "Behold, I am making all things renewed." There ends the word. You may be seated. I want to thank Reverend Jessica and the Environmental Justice Ministry for having me back here today. It's really wonderful to be back here among you all, and especially on this day of days for me, which I often think of as the secular Easter, if you will, but that's just me. And I know that Reverend Jessica last week informed you a little bit about the book from which I'm going to be preaching. So more about that in a minute. But just about 20 years ago, there were two people, one who was a Christian scholar, the other one a Unitarian Universalist scholar, and together they studied the history of Christianity and wrote books together about religion. And one spring they were traveling in Europe to some of the oldest Christian churches ever built, the ones that have been around since a few hundred years after the Christian religion began. And they were beautiful churches. The traditional shape for old churches is a cruciform or sometimes a capital T. And now this part of the church that I'm standing in, that we're in, is called the chancel, or sometimes the apse. And it often has a very high ceiling or dome, and the inside of the dome is usually covered in pictures or symbols, as ours today is so beautifully and vibrantly displayed with butterflies. These chancels of old churches, these two friends visited, were filled with pictures of Jesus and the saints and the natural world and stories from the Bible. And as they visited them, after a while, these two people started to notice something odd about these churches. They went to one in Ravenna, Italy, that was built in the 6th century. And its ceiling is a gorgeous mosaic of nature. Lots of flowers and trees and birds. And in this mosaic, this picture, a blue sky stretches behind hills of mossy green rocks. And sheep are in the hills, and the figures of shepherds. And in the midst of all this, in the background, is the face of Jesus. But there is no crucifix, no cross even. And they thought that was interesting. And then they went to the catacombs outside Rome, which are places where people are buried, and so they had a great deal of religious meaning. And there they saw many depictions of Jesus. There's Jesus' birth with Mary holding the infant child, and Jesus healing people, and Jesus feeding a huge crowd, and Jesus as a shepherd. But there is no crucifix, not even an empty cross. And they went to the church that has the earliest image of Jesus of any church apse or chancel, Santa Pudenziana in Rome, which also has mosaics, pictures, created 300 to 400 years after Jesus' time. And it shows Jesus holding a scroll and talking with his students. Again, no crucifix, no cross. These two scholars started to wonder what the heck was going on. And they did some more research, and they discovered something amazing. There are no images of Jesus on the cross for the first 1,000 years of Christian church building. For the first half of Christianity, crucifixion is not the central image. It's not an image at all. There are some crosses, yes. They just don't have Jesus on them. He's shown instead doing other things, healing, teaching, making gestures of welcome and of blessing. And the people who built and worshiped in these holy places knew, of course, all about the story of the crucifixion. It was part of the story, a key part of the story about Jesus. It's told 5 times in the first 4 Gospels. Jesus died, and he died on a cross, but that just doesn't seem to be the part of the story that interested Christians for half of the history of Christianity. It's quite shocking to people like me, and maybe for you, and most people who walk into Christian churches nowadays. It was quite a shocker to the 2 people in my story who I know from last week's sermon, you know, were Rita Nakashima Brock and Rebecca Ann Parker, and who wrote the book about what they learned called Saving Paradise. Apparently, the crucifixion isn't necessarily as central to Christianity as we have been led to believe. It wasn't the center at all for those 1,000 years until something changed. What made things change is an interesting question, and Brock and Parker go into it at length in their book, but from that I distill this question for us today. The question I want to explore together with you is this: if the crucifixion wasn't the center of Christianity, what was? Reverend Jessica last week brought many images, especially the table, the welcome table, as the central image. But Parker and Brock asked, and the answer was right there in those mosaics and the beautiful pictures and images. Each of them had a vision of paradise in them, a very particular kind of paradise, a paradise that is right here in this world that we live in right now, a paradise that is right here in the life we are living right now. And at its heart, it's not the cross or the crucifixion, but creation itself. And I submit to you that Easter is about how to find paradise again, how to renew our image of paradise and what it can be still if we revive it. And at its heart, Christianity is about how Jesus taught us to seek out paradise, to know what it is, to know what it is when we see it, to rejoice in it, to preserve it, to sustain it, to revive it. So, what is paradise? Well, I'm glad I asked. There are 3 different ways to answer this big question, and the answer each of us gives will have a huge effect on how we live our lives. And there are at least 3 central answers currently at work within Christianity today, I believe. And one answer is paradise is about another place and another time altogether. To be specific, it's where you go after you die, and maybe only if you've been good. The universalist in me thinks contrary to that, but another word for paradise for some people is heaven. It's a realm beyond the body, beyond the world, beyond the life we live right now. And in this answer, in that way of looking at things, the body suffers, and the world is a mess, and life is scary. So you want to get beyond all those bad things to the blessed place, the only truly good place. But here's the catch. Because the way you get there is you die. If that's how we think about paradise, then it makes a lot of sense to have the crucifixion front and center. That way, we're constantly reminded that this world is a terrible place where good people suffer and die, and we're shown the way out. And then we get to the good stuff. The only way out is to die. And thinking this way, if we do, we'll be resurrected the way Jesus was. And so for the last 1,000 years, that's been one of the dominant views within Christianity. Not the only one. Christianity is a very diverse and complex religion, a very large tent, and a big one. Now, another way to understand paradise is this. We were already given a perfect world right here in this life. The Bible called it Eden. And at first sight, it looks like that's what's going on in all those beautiful mosaics. The grass is lush and green, the birds are flying, there are flowers and trees and bushes of many kinds that no one is allergic to. And a river runs gently through it. Eden was called a garden. But you might notice if you read the first few chapters of Genesis, the Garden of Eden wasn't really a garden, not like the garden you and I might grow around the house or be busy planting perhaps at this season. Those require a lot of work and attention. Can I get an amen? Amen. In Eden, Adam and Eve had everything they needed without having to do a thing. They were just fed as babies are fed, fruit dropping into their hands, no weeding, no mulching, no drip lines, no effort on their parts. But the problem with this understanding of paradise is that if you look around the world, we have, through this story, the earth is beautiful, but does require our work and attention. And we've obviously already blown it. So we tell stories that explain why things aren't perfect anymore. We talk about how we messed up. We fouled the nest. We were given perfection, and we are imperfect. So paradise is a thing of the past. And the only way we can get back to it is to wipe out everything and start over. As that passage in John has often been interpreted, new, not as in renewed, but as in a totally other earth. But we know that the crucifixion has been used to promote that idea too. When after 1,000 years, the crucified Jesus started showing up in the art of the churches of Europe and Asia. And Jesus started showing up there too. The angry judge, who sent some people to the pit that was hell, others to the glorious walled city that was heaven, as some of our siblings believe. In that view, all of the bad people and bad things will be cleared away one day, and the few good survivors will get to live in paradise once again, if you can call it paradise when most people are locked out. There is a third way, a third paradise, not of the future, nor of the past, but of the present. Brock and Parker saw it in the mosaics of Ravenna and the catacombs of Rome. This third view of paradise envisions it in this world, among the rivers and trees, the hills and sky we know. It's not the long ago Eden to which we can't return. It's in figures like Mary carrying for her baby. It's like shepherds who tend the vulnerable flocks of sheep. And most of all, it is in Jesus, who is shown speaking to his students of learning and wisdom, who is feeding the hungry and healing the sick, tending to the needs of all. It is not a dead Jesus. Jesus is never dead on those walls. It's the living one, the rabbi, the teacher, the healer, who taught that we should love one another and care for everyone, who said, "By this you shall be known as my disciples, if you have love for everyone." This vision of paradise shows a world that is beautiful, holy, vulnerable, like a baby, and full of potential, like a baby. And again, just like a baby, imperfect. It's our world, a paradise that is all around us and within us, that also needs us. We can destroy it or we can revive it and sustain it and save it. We are the shepherds, like the ones in the pictures in every church built in the first 1,000 years of Christianity. This paradise doesn't ask us to suffer and die like the crucified Jesus. It certainly doesn't ask us to kill in order to avenge that crucified Jesus, the way the church of the second 1,000 years began to teach. I recall the story of the arrival of the Reverend Dr. Cecil Williams of Glide Memorial in San Francisco. Do you know of Glide Memorial in that story? It was a Methodist church that was in decline in the 70s. I mean, there were maybe 5 or 6 people, and Cecil Williams was sent to perform a miracle. One of the first things he did that first Sunday is he hired a musician, but he also took down the cross from the church chancel. And he announced that they were a people of the resurrection. And from that moment on, they became a revived, resurrected, real, newly commissioned people. And now that church thrives, feeds thousands each week through that sense of becoming people of the resurrection. This shows us that the living Jesus and his care for creation invites us to take care of the earth and its beings, and so make this world a continuing paradise, a perpetual Eden, a garden of earth. That's how we find life in the midst of death, and that's our Easter story. Christianity is a religion for this world. And that means 2 things to me. One, that it's a religion of this world. We live as fully as we can the one life we know we have, the one wild and precious life, as the poet Mary Oliver says. We look for heaven here and now, beneath our feet and everywhere we look. The other meaning is that this is a religion for or on behalf of this world. It's a world that needs us, just as we need it. We are part of a web of interdependence, nurtured by the beings all around us and the other people we encounter who need us in return. And if we do not depend on them, we have nothing. If we harm the web, we harm ourselves. If we do not act on behalf of the world, we lose paradise forever. That's the teaching of the third way. The original vision from the early centuries of Jesus on those walls and ceilings, when he was walking the fields, when he was tending his sheep, when he was restoring the temple, when he was speaking to a stranger and friend alike, when he was a teacher and a friend, not a corpse, but vibrant, alive, doing the work of the Creator. In the third way, paradise is the whole world, not just a part, not just a garden. If we are to make paradise here, it needs to be for everyone, because otherwise it can be for no one. Paradise isn't a realm that only some people get into. It's a world community that we create, where we all are welcome. Everyone everywhere has something of the holy within, and we strive to make holiness everywhere. And as Bill McKibben reminded us yesterday, we are not allowed the luxury of despair. Instead, I say, we must learn to perform the miracles of restoration, of revival, of the renewal of our spirits and the earth. It requires some things of us. It requires divesting ourselves from the prophets of destruction and the story that we are powerless to share the abundance of this planet. It requires dismantling the systems of oppression that destroy and the stories we must relearn to free ourselves from that delusion. And it requires disrupting those areas of complacency within ourselves that allow for our participation in stories that lead to a better way. It may take a miracle. It may take a miracle. The most frequently reported miracle in the Gospels of Jesus is him feeding the multitudes with just a few loaves and a couple of fish. In the Gospels, it appears 6 times. It seems to be important. And it appears in the art of that first 1,000 years too. Jesus doesn't make a way to paradise for us by dying on the cross. He does it by making sure there's enough to go around, by what he did when he was alive, showing us that there is enough care, there is enough bread, there is enough love. In his life and teaching, he took what looked like scarcity, like not enough, like despair and hunger, and he made a paradise for everyone, which is the only kind of paradise there really can be. My friends, it is within our power to create justice and fairness. It is within our power to live and create and revive ourselves by taking this world in all its beauty and imperfection and making it into Eden again. May it be so, by what we do or leave undone. Amen. And now we will sing again, because I'm sure they sang that first 1,000 years in Christianity. So we're going to reacclimate by singing again This Pretty Planet. Angela will play it through once, and then we'll just sing it through once, those 3 parts, one time. Let us rise in body and spirit as we're able, and join. Let this be both a promise and a prayer to ourselves and the world. Thank you, my friends.